Yo, how's it going, guys? As promised, I am going to be doing my Resto Druid guide. Before we get started, I just want to say that I do not by any means think that I am the best Resto Druid. As a matter of fact, I think it's probably one of my worst healers. I've had decent success with it. You know, I've gotten to like 3rd in solo shuffle. 2650 is my highest. I could probably get a little bit higher if I prioritized it, but I just don't do as well on Druid as opposed to my other healers, so I generally don't play it like as much. I would say most of what I'm saying probably does have some sort of like truth or impact, but maybe you can cross-reference a little bit, or you don't have to. If you don't believe what I'm saying, I'm not going to sit here and say I'm right no matter what, I guess. Pros and cons of Resto Druids. Let's just go ahead and fix this segment here. Let's go and fix that one. Resto Druid right now I think is undoubtedly the best healer. I think it has the highest throughput, the most stable throughput. I guess maybe one of its weaknesses is that it can run out of mana, but one of its biggest strengths is that it's one of the only healers that could actually stealth drink. So it kind of is a double-edged sword. Yes, you go but if you're actively looking for drinks, most scenarios you can actually get them to, refill your mana. You have probably the best CC in the game. You have the best healing in the game. The class is just, it's really, really solid. You could probably play Resto Druid with any single comp, and yeah, it would be really good. I'm going to go ahead and go over my add-ons. If you guys have watched one of my videos before, it's the same add-ons I always use. You can skip it. No Taint 2 actually tells you when your action bars are broken. If you need to reload, doesn't always work, but it's better than nothing. Big debuff shows bigger debuffs on your raid frames. Details is the damage tracking meter. Diminish shows your DRs. You can put them wherever you want, and you can also see your teammates' DRs. It's kind of important for me to know when I'm about to lose to a sub-rogue by my whole team being off DR. Frame sort is the new add-on that allows you to adjust where you're at in the raid or party frame. My slot is for copying action bars. Nameplate buff is my nameplate add-on. Omni bar shows enemy CDs. Omni CD shows friendly CDs. Party pet fix, fixes the pet frames on the party, but I think it might actually already be fixed. I just haven't actually checked. Either way, S Arena updated too by Sammers. If you haven't gotten this one yet, this is the new update to S Arena. True stat values allows you to see if you're hitting DRs for your stats. It's kind of nice to have just so you can like kind of balance out your stats a little bit better. Weak auras. Oh man, obviously there's some insane weak auras. I'll go over a couple of them that get commonly asked. So I have a reforestation weak aura. Let me see. This one you can't actually use, unfortunately. Tree active. I'll just go ahead and like have the links here if you want to pause. This one's actually really nice. I would definitely recommend getting this one. This just shows the it shows rejuves on target, how many if you play germination, and it also shows life blooms on your raid frames to the side of the raid frame, so you always see it. That's a pretty good one that generally gets asked for. This is actually a really nice one, a reclone weak R. It doesn't work on the 3rd DR, like if you're after your 2nd clone, but really nice for retiming your 1st clone. You just clone when this gets to 0. This is a reforestation weak R you could use. The other one was like kind of stuck on my action bar, so you couldn't actually copy it. This might actually be the rejuve counter if you're interested in this one. I get asked this one a lot. Soul the Forest, link is right here. Are the links changing? Okay, they are changing. Soul the Forest, link's right there. And I think that's about all that is really necessary. So yeah, weak R is obviously really, really important. Super nice stuff. Macros. I actually have a couple macros that you guys are probably going to be interested in. One, I actually have to go over weak R again. I'm going to kind of go through these, and I'll go over the more important ones. A lot of them are pretty standard. Dispel Party 1. This is a Help Harm macro for Wrath and Dispel. Help Harm macros are really nice for having extra keybinds. So for example, my number 1 is Regrowth and Starfire. My number 2 is Rejuve and Wrath. My number 3 is Life Bloom and Star Surge, depending on if you're targeting a friendly enemy. So really helpful for extra keybinds. Cancel Form macro, just kind of nice, so you can like instantly shift out of roots, or back when people used to have Hibernate, like you'd have to switch, or like Scare Beast. Cyclone Arena 1, Cyclone Arena 2, Cyclone Arena 3. These are actually really helpful, in my opinion. Like, if you feel like you're struggling to get clones and you're actually comfortable with Arena 1, 2, 3 macros, this is really nice. You can kind of clone who you want without having to change targets. Dispel Party 2, Focus Bash, Focus Cyclone, Focus Entangling Roots, Wild Growth Moonfire, Help Harm macro, that's irrelevant. Send Ward Hibernate, Help Harm macro, Dispel Player, Invigorate Cyclone, Help Harm. Kick macros. I think these kick macros work actually pretty well, but I don't really ever play kick, but if you guys are interested in them, they are right here. This is for regular. This is for focus. This macro just puts Rake and Prowl in the same keybind. So if you're in Prowl, it'll Rake, and if you're not in Prowl, it will put you in Prow and allow you to rake. So if you're playing rake stun, it's actually a pretty decent macro. This is my Shadow Meld macro. What this will do, and it's actually kind of important, is, and I've noticed this happening before, is if you're not in combat, it'll Prow you, and if you are in combat, it'll meld you. I've actually noticed sometimes that when I meld, I'm actually not in combat. So I just completely waste my meld, so this will kind of like make it so that doesn't happen, which is kind of nice. Cursor on Vortex, Frenzied Regen, just Bear Form Frenzied Regen, spammable Bear Form macro, so like you can't come out of it. Target Innervate Self Player, Cat Form spammable, Travel Form spammable, NS. I actually have a Grove Guardians macroed into my NS. I notice that sometimes in like these really tight scenarios with Grove Guardians having like a separate global, like if I was like Iron Barking or NSing, it was hard for me to like Iron Bark NS and like spam Grove Guardians at the same time. So I actually ended up putting a Grove Guardian in my NS and my Iron Bark. I think I've liked it so far. Just cast Overgrowth, whatever. This is the Help Harm macros here. Help Harm macro here, Help Harm macro here. This is actually a very common macro that people ask me for a lot. It's to kind of try and avoid Death Knight grip. It's really important to have the cancel form here because otherwise you take yourself out of tree form when you do it, and then you waste a global, and you could actually use the leap in tree form, so it's very helpful. But if you are ready to press this macro when a Death Knight grips you, you instantly leap back to your Trent, and it's super helpful to like avoid that first grip. There may be a second grip coming, but it should give you enough time to like at least try and pre-bear and or like meld the grip or like, you know, pre-hot yourself with Overgrowth or something. So yeah, tree macro, this I believe makes it so you can not spam it, same as my other ones. So you don't accidentally waste another global. Now this is my Trent Drink Shadow Meld macro. So if I'm trying to Shadow Meld Drink, this is the button that you have to use. I guess this is why I took the drink out of the other one. But there's two things you need for this. You need a weak aura, which I will actually show you momentarily. And then you also need this. So basically this kills all your Trents and allows you to drink immediately. Super helpful macro. So it's called Fixed Totem Frame. Here's the weak aura link. You'd have to pause to obviously grab that. And show you the macro one more time. Renewal Hellstone, I'm lazy. You probably shouldn't have this bound together. Or you should at least have one of them separate. You could have Hellstone separate. Maybe you could have Renewal separate, but I'm lazy. Iron Bark with Grove Guardians. I have a target player Mark of the Wild, and it's weird, but basically if you ever want to rebuff someone, as long as they're within like 60 yards or something, it'll always rebuff them, so I just have it by default targeted myself. Oh, there's actually a heal drink macro you could use now as well. So if you're like falling out of combat and you want to refresh your blooms, you could actually press your blooms and sit down and drink at the same time, and you'll be drinking while in combat, while in stealth. Super broken. Route 1, 2, 3 is actually very, very helpful in my opinion. Probably maybe a little overkill, but I like it. I use a lot of 1, 2, 3 macros because you can just spam root DPS while you're in tree form, so it just feels very smooth if you're comfortable with those. But yeah, actually a lot of important macros. Normally a lot of my macros are just kind of like very standard, you know, focus macros or whatever, but those are some good ones. Stat Prios and Enchants. I think this might be a little bit of a debated opinion, but basically I'm trying to well-round my stats out quite a bit. I am trying to not be over the Mastery DR. I'll show you right now what I'm at. So I'm in the 10% penalty as Mastery. I think it's okay to be at the 10% penalty, but I'm barely in it when I'm under the 90% range. So basically it's because of Zen Focus that I'm so far even into that. So I try and take account, like I won't always have that up. So looking at my stats now, I'm only like, I'm like halfway through. Oh, I'm like halfway through that penalty. But yeah, I kind of healed myself up a little bit, which isn't that bad. Some Druids play a lot lower verse and a lot more haste, which I actually think is probably pretty decent in Solo Shuffle. I don't know, man. I tried it, and, you know, I've done decent in Solo Shuffle. I'm not the best Solo Shuffle Druid, so it's kind of up to you. Do you feel like you get swapped too often, and do you feel like you don't do the best job surviving? I think it might be like a little bit of a skill ceiling issue, where the better you are at Resto Druid, the less often you find yourselves in situations where you are dying because you're in better positions. You're better at rotating, whatever. I die a lot. Guess that means I'm bad. So I actually play pretty heavy verse, but I feel like my stats are pretty well rounded. I don't know. I look at this and I don't see anything upsetting here. So yeah, basically we are not DR'd in anything except just a little bit in the Mastery. And then Enchants, it's the same as all the other healers. Sophic, you know, some people play Mastery. I don't actually think it matters. I think the Int's better. You know, mana here, speed, speed. I use Stam here, but yeah, you could use speed if you want. And then I have Verse here, but I could do haste or whatever, you know. You could do whatever you want depending on the stats. Just I like to balance my stats out. If you I don't think it's worth going really heavy Mastery because it actually DRs really, really quickly. But if you want to go for really heavy haste instead of Verse, you're more than welcome to do that. In terms of crafted gear and embellishments, you could go double Zone of Focus if you want. But I would say if you specifically do Soul Shuffle, I think Precog is just so broken in Soul Shuffle, man. People are so uncoordinated with their kicks that it feels like you're almost always going to get value if you're a Cyclone Andy. It doesn't even matter sometimes, like, even if you do get kicked, sometimes people just straight up overlap their kicks and you'll get kicked and then the next person will kick at the same time, and then you'll just have Precog coming out and you get the free clone, you're immune to the CC. It feels really important to have Precog for Soul Shuffle. I think it's probably pretty good in 3s as well, just because how powerful clone can be, but Zone of Focus is definitely, I think, the secondary. I'll show you the gear that I have as well. Lifebound there. Eventually I'll probably do a crafted belt as well. These are the NG ones, and I assume that the gear I have is right with the non-NG helm. I don't know. It looks right to me. I think this has like crit on it, the main piece, so yeah. And then double Verse Mastery Ring is what I'm using. In terms of tier gear, I personally do feel like it's worth using 4-piece. It's just free healing. Let me see if I could find a game here, like a somewhat long game. This is a 5-minute game. My Nourish did, what is this, 3.1% healing, basically for free. Considering the stats aren't terrible on it, an extra free 3% healing isn't bad. Only the chest piece is really bad in terms of stats. Like, everything else is good. These are stats that you want, stats that you want, stats that you want, like, absolutely. So using, like, you know, obviously high crit is bad, but low mastery, it's okay. So for one piece, like one trade-off, it's completely reasonable. The water you use is the Delicious Dragon Spittle. You can get it from the auction house. Don't use the vendor water. It is just strictly worse. Now, Spec Honor Talents. This is an interesting one. So what I'm going to show you right now, I'm going to start with the right side of the tree. So I'm going to start with Soul Shuffle. If I were to Soul Shuffle, I think I would exclusively play... This is what I would play on the right side for Soul Shuffle. I think in 3s, when it's going to be like a bit more of a mana game, Tranquil Mind's better. I think it's Soul Shuffle when you just need raw throughput and mana's not as important. I think the crit on Imp Regrowth's better. I think Wild Synthesis is like a little bit more, I don't want to say pad healing, but unimpactful healing as opposed to CDR in Soul Shuffle. It is just absolutely insane to have 20 seconds off your tree form. You could do a Send Ward Swiftmen almost back to back. You know, OG Ironbark, it gives you another Trent, which helps get tree form up even faster. I think that this is actually just straight up better than Wild Synthesis. And in terms of this build, if you're looking at this build and you're confused, like, you know, there's no budding, what's going on here? This build just seems to be like the best build, the most stable. You don't have to worry about the life blooms getting purged, falling off, swapping them. And you have a lot more uptime on Unbridled, which is actually, if you have, like, let's just say you have 22% mastery, it's actually 42% healing increase to your HOTS, which is almost like the same amount of healing you get from Budding Leaves if it has 100% uptime. So it actually is just good. Yeah, it just feels really powerful. Making sure that you're aware of the reforestation stacks is also very important. You know when that Swiftmen is going to put you in tree form, that you're just going to be completely safe. And then you don't have to play Invigorate. I like Invigorate. The way I use it is just I have no other buttons to press. What should I do? And it feels good every single time. I feel like nothing could happen to make me feel like I would notice 5% HOTS ticking faster, but whenever I press Invigorate, I notice my healing actually increase for the time being. So it does feel really good, in my opinion. If you don't like it, 100%. I think a lot of people don't like it, so it is completely reasonable. But yeah, this is the spec that I like the most. In 3s, I normally will just kind of make this switch to more mana efficiency, kind of more overall healing of the game, because the games aren't super short, so like one Trank with CDR doesn't feel as good. And then if you're ever playing like I want to say like a Wizard Cleave matchup where you're the Wizard Cleave, you can actually just take the Master Shapeshifter and just start pumping Wrass. And if you don't want to pump Wrass, because they have a CS available, you could actually just start pumping Starfires. Every single one you cast is a net gain. Over on the left-hand side, you have a couple flex points here. I like to, well, I was more so playing this when I was low verse, but yeah, so Heart of the Wild, I would say, is very good in Soul Shuffle. The couple flex points are here. You don't really need Innervate and Soul Shuffle versus casters. I kind of like Knock. You could play Improved Rejuve. Improved Rejuve is also very good with Invigorate if you are playing Invigorate, because it gives you like the extra ticks or whatever, because the base duration's higher and it resets them to the base duration. If you're feeling like a little frisky, you know, you could drop Well Honed instead. If you need Decurse, you know, you could keep Well Honed, you could drop Decurse here. But basically, this is the spec I almost play. I don't play twos. I couldn't show you a damage build. I don't ever swap to like the movement speed stuff. I like the range. I feel like it's really nice. For Cyclones, I tried playing without the range before, and one of the first things I noticed is it feels like it's almost impossible to bash people because it increases bash range. So this is, you know, this is what I generally roll with. If you want movement speed and all that stuff, you know, by all means. I'm not going to tell you that it's worse. I generally don't play Heart in threes if I feel like games are going to be slower, and obviously Innervate gets a lot more value in threes. So, I mean, you could play it if you want. You kind of have this flex point here. Do you want Knock? Do you want Imp Rejuve? Do you want Heart? You know, do you want Decurse? Without dropping any of the other stuff, which is, you know, the 1 point Well Honed over here. Or you could even say, you know, I want to take Rake Stun. You know, it's all good. In terms of honor talents, I generally will always play Focus Growth and Keeper of the Grove. And then your flex point is, you know, do you want Disentanglement if you ever decide to, like, play Verdancy, which I would normally drop Wild Synthesis for. Do you want Thorns, which I don't really play that often, but, like, if you don't care about mana and you're playing a Cleave and Soul Shuffle, you could play Thorns. I don't think you're going to get any value out of High Winds. I don't think it lasts long enough. Call of the Elder Druid. Basically, the two I really use is into Purge teams, I'll use Reactive Resin to protect your HOTS, and into non-Purge teams, I use Call of the Elder Druid. If you're wondering why Call of the Elder Druid is good, you know, if a team tries to kill you, every minute you get the extra Frenzied Regen, but on top of that, you actually get faster clones. Heart of the Wild increases your clone cast speed by 30%, which is really nice. So, like, if you ever want to try to play aggressive, it's off CD, you go into cat form, it procs, you leap over, you bash the healer, your clone's 30% faster, bada bing, bada boom. Good crowd control. Some people like instant wall growth, I'm not a huge fan. Healing rotation on Druid is actually kind of interesting. So, I feel like it's a little bit more in depth than most healers. So, if you're stable, #1 priority is Life Bloom, because that is 3 counts of mastery. Your second prio would be Rejuve, and that is going to allow you to activate Swiftmen. Your third prio is, well, if you can Regrowth, you know, obviously you can cast Regrowth, but this is kind of like a stable thing, right? So Send Ward / Adaptive, and then Swiftmen to extend Send. And then you kind of regrowth in between. One thing that I will say is that there's definitely times where if your 2 DPS are kind of out in the middle and they have life blooms on them, you just cast regrowth on yourself to apply the buff to everyone that has a life bloom because of this talent right here. And that's actually definitely pretty good. So the main rotation here on Druid is just keeping up blooms. You want your blooms to never fall off. Some people don't know this, not everybody. But if you refresh your blooms under 5 seconds, they always bloom. So the healing will always, you know, they always do that pop healing. Any point under 5 seconds. Why didn't that work? That's so weird. I don't... Okay, I swear it's any time under 5 seconds. But I'll do it like 4 seconds right now. I could be crazy. I don't know what happened there. Maybe it has something to do with haste. Ready? 4 seconds? Okay, they bloomed. So you always want to refresh under 5 seconds. I'll try and do like at 5 right now. Maybe it's 4. Maybe I'm a liar. We'll do it... Oh, you know what I think? Here, we'll do it like 5 now. We'll do it like right now, right? Is it? Okay, yeah. Any time under 5 seconds, they always bloom. So you want to make sure your blooms don't ever expire if possible, because then you're keeping this buff up. And you just want to adaptive on CD. Every time adaptive is up, you press it. And every time Send Ward is up, you press it and you Swiftmen on CD. And it works out really well because Send Ward is a 30-second CD. So you Send Ward, then you Swiftmen. And then you Swiftmen on CD. So it lines up perfectly with the next Send Ward. As soon as the Send Ward comes off CD, you press it. Or excuse me, as soon as the... well, you should be doing this too, but yeah. As soon as the Swiftman comes off CD, you press the Swiftman. And now it lines up perfectly with your next Send Ward Swiftman. So you kind of rotate between those two. I guess it wasn't maybe that complicated, but I don't know. It seems a little bit more. I will say that a lot of people try and like spam Bloom to get 3 stacks. I'm someone that doesn't do that. I get my stacks like naturally. All natural, baby. I don't really think it's super important to spam Life Bloom, I guess, to get the stacks up. Maybe there's some scenario where you know you're about to get CC'd and everyone's full HP and you have no better globals to press. They have everything already, but, you know, it's more so just kind of keeping these hots up, like regrowthing. You want to try and regrowth only with procs or else you will and then doing the other two on CD. Damage rotation, I mean, damage rotation is, you don't really do too much damage on Druid, but if you want to do damage, you can put up a Moonfire. Sunfire is a little too expensive. You have to be really aggressive with mana if you want to try and do it with Sunfire. If you spec in a Star Surge is pretty nice. I don't think it's actually ever worth going into Moonkin form to try and do damage unless you are Heart of the Wild. Nope, doesn't even matter if you're not Heart of the Wild. It really only matters if you're Master Shapeshifter. Moonkin form only gives you 10% more damage. So gaining 10% more damage at the cost of a global doesn't really feel worth it. Also, yeah, it kind of prevents you from doing other stuff, so you're probably going to come out pretty quickly. But if you are Master Shapeshifter for like mana, then it's obviously really important, but it also does increase the damage by even more, and it also gives you the mana back, so that's pretty important. But yeah, you want to Star Fire if you're afraid of getting kicked. Like if you're actually trying to do damage, you can Star Fire. And if you're not afraid to do damage, I'm pretty sure Wrath is just kind of better. It's less mana, kind of shoot it out faster. Feels pretty good. Cooldown rotation on Druid is a little bit weird. You don't really have too much. I would say if you're not the one being targeted, like, you know, Iron Bark is, well, depends what you consider a cooldown, right? Like OG, Bark, NS. I guess you have Tree. I guess I should say externals, maybe not healing cooldowns, right? Like, what do we got? Trank and Renewal. I would say most games, and this is actually really important, I'm gonna touch on this a little bit later, but most games start with Tree like almost as soon as combat engages, and it's actually kind of important to do that, and I'll talk about that, but Tree is almost happening first global every single time for a couple of reasons. But yeah, so you're popping like one of your best healing globals immediately, and you're probably going to use it off CD every single time, so Tree is just one of those things that you use immediately. OG is going to be used as like a oh shit, I got no hots up button, and I don't have time to put them all up. OG technically could be used for pure efficiency if you're trying to like Omega dampen people, because it's only 6,500 mana for 4 hots, as opposed to just pressing a Rejuve, which is just straight up like 5k mana. Like Rejuve is actually kind of 5,500 mana. Like Overgrowth's barely more. Oh my gosh, 500 more mana for all that extra healing, yeah. So it is actually like an efficiency button. You know, Barkskin and Iron Bark are going to be used, I guess, like if you get caught in a stun, it's really obvious that you can Barkskin, but sometimes you have to press Barkskin without being in a stun, and just remember that it does increase your healing by 20% right here, and Iron Bark also increases healing by 20%. Those do stack, but just kind of recognize that they're both actually a healing cooldown as well as a damage reduction cooldown. But I would say Iron Bark is probably going to be mostly lined up with like enemy CDs. So if you're familiar with how enemy CDs work, Serenity, Call of the Wild, you know, Unholy Frenzy with Army of the Dead, you know, Arcane Surge, Shadow Blades, things like that. You're just going to press Iron Bark on, you know, basically immediately. And then Trank is just your last like oh shit button. Well, you'll use Renewal before Trank, and you always want to try and use Renewal before going into Bear. That way you get more health. So it actually is purely percent based. It doesn't get increased by any other healing effects. It won't get increased by Barkskin. It won't get increased by Hots. Frenzy Regen does, and also Frenzy Regen works very well with Adaptive Swarm because this also increases your hot healing. But yeah, so you want to try and Bear before Frenzy. It's actually really helpful. And then Trank is just your like, oh shit, I got nothing button. Unless you're doing Soul Shuffle and you're playing it for CDR, in which case, you know, I'll show you like a time where I'll probably like Trank here and Soul Shuffle. You know what I mean? So like right now, I can't even leave Tree Farm right now. Shit. Right now, like if I'm getting crushed in Soul Shuffle, this is a perfect Trank. Look at this. I'm not spec'd it, but just imagine Send Ward coming off cooldown, Tree Form comes off cooldown, I get my Swift Man back, you know what I mean? It feels really, really good in Soul Shuffle. Mana efficiency on Druid, there's a couple things. Number one, you could actually try and be very mana efficient and not overheal, which actually means don't use Rejuve, and I know it sounds crazy, but when you're in Tree Form and you have all these Trents out, and you're using your Send Wards and your Swiftmans on CD just for more Tree procs, whatever, and you're using Adaptives, you actually may find yourself pressing Rejuve, and it's completely, like, overhealing. Like, you don't need it at all. Let's take a look here at my game here. 35% of my healing here on this rejuve is actually overhealing, which is maybe not necessary in a 5.5 minute game. So that's 5,500 mana per rejuve. It's actually really helpful. Next thing for mana efficiency is try not to ever wild growth unless like you're desperate. Like you need that mastery, so you're desperate for this. This is really, really expensive. Try not to ever shroom, especially if you're not playing talents, but you can, just so you know, if you're ever innervated, you could definitely wild growth, you could definitely shroom. They're completely fine to use. And then try not to ever cast a regrowth without a proc. Those are like the 3 main things that you will do to go on Resto Druid, is using regrowths without proc, using wild growth, using shroom, and using rejuve unnecessarily. Don't be too greedy, you know what I mean? Use it if you gotta do healing. But yeah, those will definitely they'll you pretty hard. On top of that, I would say like the best way to go for meld drinks is off of your own team's pressure. So if you feel like you're struggling to get drinks, definitely talk with your team. Like, listen, I need to go for drinks. When's the next time you guys are going to set up a burst? And sometimes it's really hard for the opposing team to counteract your drink while also having to deal with a lot of pressure. Positioning on Resto Druid, it really kind of depends. I would say in 3s, you could definitely get away more with kind of like being passive, but I feel like since the changes, you like in Solo Shuffle, you definitely need to go for Cyclones. You can, start far back, like get clones on DPS, push in, then try and get clones on healers while like DPS are already cloned. But this is something that you really can't like teach in a guide. It's just more like understanding and recognizing the situation. I would say it's not really like super great to push in. If like the team has a CS, maybe try and like bait that CS before you push in. So you can play back, try and pretend like you're cloning DPS, and when you get the CS out of the way, you can actually do stuff, push in. And then also like be aware of your cooldowns, right? Like if they just recently swapped you have no trinket, you have no bark, you have no overgrowth, things like that, you probably want to be in a defensive position. Utility, CC, being offensive. So the only thing you really are bringing to the table in terms of utility is probably Cyclone. And then when you want to be offensive really kind of depends on some of the stuff I actually just talked about, is looking for good opportunities to Cyclone. It's one of the trickiest parts of Druid, is juggling, keeping your hots up, while juggling also trying to get out good CC. It's probably one of the highest skill ceiling healers. So if you're not great at it, don't beat yourself up and just, practice. But it's looking for those opportunities when you could try and Cyclone. Like, you're in tree form, your DPS has full hots up, there's a kick available. Will you lose the game if you go for this? Even if you do get CS, probably not. Things like that. Just try and be aware of, is it a good time to go for a Cyclone? Do they have kicks available? Are we dying? Sometimes, as crazy as it sounds, like, going for a clone when you're dying is actually, can maybe save you. Does the person you're trying to clone have trinket? There's so many factors to like take in. It's a trial and error thing. I'm not the best at it, but yeah, you just gotta try and feed all that information at the same time. But precog helps. So you know what I mean? Like you could just try and like fake every once in a while, and if you ever get that precog, go with it. Dealing with kicks, every single guide I talk about dealing with kicks. It's completely it's one of those things that you just kind of have to understand, when kicks are available. But the only thing I could really ever say is try not to make your kick patterns, or excuse me, your fake patterns readable, I guess. You want to always try and like fake at a different percentage, mostly. Like you don't want to always fake at the same time. And sometimes you even do need to be ballsy and like just straight up go for that cast, depending on the situation. If you are safe, right? Like if you have full hots up, maybe even Iron Bark's out, you already pre-barked, whatever, go for that clone. And if they kick you, doesn't even matter. You got full hots up already. This is actually like one of the things that I've struggled the most with Resto Druid, is surviving. When people hard swap to you, what do? And I mean, this is a tough one. So I would say your first go-to buttons are like Skin, Overgrowth, like Bear Form, Renewal, Frenzy. Those are kind of your go-to. Like, you get gripped in, Overgrowth, you already Skin, you Bear Form, you Renewal, you Frenzy. But without these, I mean, it is just tricky. Like, without these, if a team is trying to kill you, you probably got to keep Life Blooms on yourself, as well as like keeping a potentially a pre-rejuve, trying to like pre-bear stuns. Some things that maybe you don't realize is you can use Adaptive Swarm while in bear form, you can use Trents while in bear form, and you could actually use NS while in bear form. So you can kind of be like a little, loosey-goosey with that. Leaping to teammates is really helpful. Like vortexing, leaping to teammates, a lot of times like you'll instantly get the warriors to like, get charged back, or demon hunters to get charged back. But yeah, it's a tricky one. It's definitely a tricky one. I would say if you're susceptible to dying, just try and make sure you save overgrowth for yourself. Maybe even like, you know, pre-hot yourself a little bit. If you can't keep blooms on yourself, just like at least a rejuve and a regrowth. That way you can at least like immediately swift mend if you get swapped to, which is kind of nice. Maybe even like pre-send ward it. You could also, if you're taking no damage, you have no dots on you, you could actually just put a send ward up on yourself and it won't actually start ticking down until you take that first bit of damage. But yeah, it's a tricky one. If I were playing this spec here, and I'm dying, you could maybe potentially, like, if it's not like a mana game, like drop Innervate and like Ursine, or sorry, Heart of the Wild for like double Ursine, which is actually going to make your Frenzies heal for more as well as your renewal. Things like that. And in terms of offensive and defensive, I feel like we kind of already talked about this a little bit with like trying to recognize good times to get CC. Whenever you can get clones on Druid, it is just insane. And it's just, it's all about like understanding when kicks are available, what defensives you have, you know, are we in a situation where it can be safe here? It's also kind of important, and I will say this, like in a solo shuffle lobby, to maybe just understand that like, yo, we're screwed. I need this, we're gonna go for it, and that's that. Like maybe either you have you know, what we like to call the lobby dog, where they're not gonna win around this solo shuffle, and the only way they're gonna win this round is if you clone the living shit out of people. In which case you're just kind of saying screw it, if I get stopped, I get stopped, we're gonna lose anyway, and you play super aggressive. Or maybe, you know, you have a good team and you're just all in. Like you got no tree form, you got no OG, you got no Swiftman, no NS, no Bark, no nothing. And it's like, I can't keep you up anymore. I need to start doing this or else game's going to be over regardless. It really just kind of comes down to, you know, experience. You just got to get reps in. And yeah, in terms of comps, I mean, Resto Druid, in my opinion, is just straight up the best healer. I think you could probably play it with any comp that is already like viable, and it will be good, if not the best healer. That is my current opinion on Resto Druids. So with that being said, I'm going to go talk about this build a little bit and why this specific build is really, really insane at the, you know, start of matches. Number one is reforestation. While you're in arena prep, the buff does not go away. You want to 100% make sure you come out of the gates with 2 stacks of reforestation. This is incredibly important. Checklist number one. You could do this in the mid rounds of solo shuffle. You have enough time. You have 30 seconds. You do 2 swift bends. You're fine. So you want to make sure you do this. Number two, you want to make sure you adaptive swarm essentially on cooldown in the gates. And I'm going to draw a picture here because it's kind of weird at how adaptive swarm works. All right. So these are your party frames. Okay. These are your party frames. Let's just say you're at 55 seconds right now in arena prep. Okay. You do 3 swarms on this guy. All right. Now we're at 30 seconds, okay? 30 seconds. All right, this swarm has now jumped. Now this guy has 2 swarms. This guy has 2 swarms because it has a chance to split. All right? So you readaptive this guy. So now this guy has 5 swarms. All right? Now 5 more seconds left in the arena. You have your last adaptive swarm. So it gets weird, okay? But let's just say this swarm jumped to here and has 4. This swarm jumped to here and has 4. And honestly, this fucking swarm jumped to here and has 1. And this one actually has 5. Okay? Now, you do your final adaptive swarm and you put it here. And now there's 4 swarms here. The gates open. All of these swarms basically lose a charge. But you could come out the gates with, like, swarms like this, like basically 3 stacks here, 3 stacks here, 4 stacks here. Okay, they don't always jump and it doesn't always work out perfectly, but you are basically starting the game with adaptive swarms that will be up for the rest of the game. It's super insane. So your whole team is basically taking 42% more healing almost forever when you do this, and you're still adapting on CD after that point, after the gates open, but it's really OP. So you come out the gates fully adaptived. It's a little bit different in solo shuffle, by the way. Basically, you have to just take away this first section and you just do the second section where you do the 30 and the 30 and the 5, and then you basically will lose a set of swarms. So this would maybe be like a 2 and a 2 and a fucking 3 or something. You know what I mean? Whatever. But yeah. Okay, so now with that being said, this is also very, very important. And I'll try and explain to you why. You want to make sure you tree form like essentially first global before you Swiftmen. It's really important. All right. So if you don't tree form before Swiftmen, what's going to happen is you are going to proc your tree form from Swiftmen, be in tree form for 10 seconds, but your tree form is not actually getting any of the CDR. So if you use Trents and they're dying, no CDR on your tree form, and the cooldown's not going, okay? And you cannot activate tree form after you proc the Swiftmen tree form. But when you use regular tree form and you Swiftmen, it extends it, okay? So I'll show you here, for example. Let's just say we mess up right here. You know, we have a Trent out right now. We do a Send Ward, and we do a Swiftman now. Right now, we essentially lost 15 seconds off our tree form cooldown because this is going to die and expire, and it's not going to reset the cooldown of our tree. And we also lost 10 seconds straight up. As opposed to the alternative where you tree form first global, and then you extend your tree immediately by 20 seconds. And if you're Swiftmenning on CD, I think the math is like basically you're in tree form for the first 50 seconds. So you tree first global, so that's 30. You Swiftmen immediately, so that takes you to 40. And within the 40 seconds, if you're Swiftmenning on CD, you will have 2 more stacks of reforestation. All right, so let's just go tree form right here. We do this here. And yeah, basically your thing is extended. You're getting all this CDR. We want to make sure that we Swiftmen on CD. It's really important anyway because you want to get your Soul of Far sealing out, which I didn't really talk about whether you want to use it on like Rejuve or Regrowth. Regrowth is more healing. Rejuve, you use it as like a hot, like if you're trying to prevent damage. But we'll see like what the timer is when we come out of this first tree form here. So we're still in tree for another 12 seconds here. So now there's like a 5-second difference between tree form and Swiftmen, where we're literally going to be back in tree form almost immediately. So now we can proc this one in 1 second. And go. And now on top of that, if you're in Soul Shuffle now, you could go a step further where you reset the Trent, and you also reset another Swiftmen. This is 5 seconds off. This will proc another tree, which will be another 5 seconds off. And yeah, you're basically in tree for almost the first minute of the game, and you're still getting CDR rolling. It's really crazy. So those 2 things are really, really important. But yeah, hopefully this was helpful in some ways. And yeah, you know, good luck with the Druid. And yeah, I hope this helped. Enjoy. That you never be lonely. Be the band, that's what